Good morning. Let's take that music down a little bit, shall we? Good morning, Gary. How are you doing, my old friend? Hope you're fit and well. Yes, it has been a while. These always seemed like a good idea when I first started doing Saturday shows. But Saturdays became very precious after a while. Morning, Craig. Morning, love the glasses. Yeah, these were purchased to look cool in Italy. And I didn't wear them, bizarrely. So I thought they'd get an outing today. There's Al Grierson, fresh back from Style Expo. How was it, Al? Incidentally, I had a comment from Al Grierson this morning on our WhatsApp group. And if you're not a member of our WhatsApp group, you can do so in the chat. One of the things that Al Grierson said was the fact that he'd been to Style Expo. He had spoken to the fine folks over at John Deere. And John Deere excavators are coming this way. There are two things on that. I can't actually remember, but I may have actually predicted that as one of my predictions for 2023. So, I told you so, if that was the case. But I also want to talk a bit about the future. And I'm not talking about the dim and distant future, dystopian Blade Runner style future. I'm talking about the next 5 to 10 years. I'll come back to it in a second, but let's catch up with this. Mark Whiting's here. Morning, Mark. How are you, my friend? And good morning, Victor. Yes, I've got my Meldrew hat on today. Bar humbug, and I don't believe it. Chris Ford says, good morning. I've made it. Good morning to you indeed. So, yes. Obviously, those of you that watch the Breakfast Show will know that I'm fresh back from... where am I fresh back from? Yes, Hamburg. There is our friend Garvin from Most Indiggers. Good morning to you, my friend. Yes, fresh back from Hamburg, where I was hanging out with the fine folks of Volvo Construction Equipment. We were talking quite a lot about electric machines and that kind of thing. And then yesterday, on yesterday's show, yesterday's Breakfast Show, we played a video of Sandvik and how they are changing their batteries. And it got me to thinking about how construction sites will look in the not too distant future. And I'm talking probably 5 or 10 years' time. If you think about how they look right now, where you have your fuel bowser and all that kind of thing, there's every possibility that's going to not go away entirely, but it's going to be shifted to one side to make room for possibly hydrogen and possibly some electric power packs. How will that look? Knowing the UK as I do, and knowing the fact that we have quite a few, how do I put it politely, scallies in our midst, I would imagine, and I don't know this to be the case, but I would imagine that the charger cables that go from the charger to the machine to actually put more juice in the batteries, I would imagine there's a fair bit of copper in those. If there is copper in those, how do we go about protecting that from theft? Because if it can be unplugged and hauled away, you can guarantee that it will be in the UK. So how will that work? And then one of the ones that really struck me the most was, what will our lunch break look like? I'm saying our lunch break. Obviously, I mean your lunch break, because I'll be sat here. My lunch break won't change. But going back to my interview with Frank Schmidt at Volvo Construction Equipment, he was talking about the fact that their machines will do a full day, but that they will need an intermediate charge. Intermediate charge meaning around about lunchtime. Now, it won't be a full charge, because by lunchtime your battery will not be fully empty. So you're only half filling it, possibly even less than that if you do a lot of idling and that kind of thing and your machine's off. But we have a situation in the UK now where, what is the average lunch break for you guys? somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, I would guess. I know a lot of people sit in the cab and eat their sarnies and that kind of thing, catch up on their emails and Facebook and all that kind of thing. To get the required amount of juice into your machine, you're going to need about an hour. What are you going to do with that hour? Are you just going to sit there and eat? Are you going to take additional sandwiches to slow down? Are you going to chew more slowly? Are you going to concentrate on your digestion? Or are you going to do something else? Love to get your thoughts on that. There you are. Garvin says 30 minutes twice a day. So 30 minutes twice a day, maybe that would be enough. But again, when you think about particularly a larger site, as it stands at the moment, if you are parked in the middle of nowhere and you're working on your machine and it comes to lunch break, you just switch the machine off or possibly keep it ticking over if you're cold. You break out the sarnies, you break out your flask, you have your 30-minute break, and you get back to your business. If you've actually got to take that machine back to a charging point, back at the compound or whatever it might be, that's an additional time. You're then going to get it back again. So how does that work? Does that mean that you have to take 40 minutes? Therefore, you take 5 minutes to drive the machine back, put it on charge for half an hour, twice a day? Or do you take a whole hour? Love to get your thoughts on that. I think there's going to be lots and lots of changes. As I say, we're very familiar with the way that fuel works now with diesel. Obviously, you fill up at the start of the day or every other day, or depending on your workload, and you just work, and then every once in a while you top her up. That will not be the case with electric machines. And I know this is taking things off at a very, very straight... I'm going to kill the music. That's really getting on my bloody nerves, actually. Bear with me 1 second. That's better. As I say, going off at a very weird tangent. When I first started flying on a regular basis, flying for pleasure and for business, I used to allow maybe an hour, possibly an hour and a half check-in time. So you'd arrive and you check in, and then you'd go grab yourself a cup of coffee, possibly have a quick look around WH Smith's, pick up a really tacky paperback, and you'd be on your flight. As airports and airlines became more busy, that extended to 2 hours. And then obviously post 9/11 with the additional security checks, that's become 3 hours or more. Yet the airports themselves have not changed. You can still really only grab yourself a cup of coffee, walk around WH Smith's possibly twice this time, and then you have to twiddle your thumbs. What happens if you've gone from a lifetime of working, or a career time, should I say, of having a 30-minute break, and suddenly you've got 50, 60, 80 minutes to kill while your machine gets its juice on board? What happens then? What happens? How will construction sites change? Lucan is here. Morning, Luke. Surely you have better things to do on a Saturday morning, do you not? If you've got 10, 15 electric machines on site, how many charging stations all want to be charged at once? And there's another point. If you do go all electric, do you have this huge bank of charging stations, or do we now have to learn how to schedule work? So I don't know. Maybe, and I'm doing this off the top of my head because I'm making this up as I go along, because this is the future, people. Maybe you have your excavators work for the first couple of hours and you stick them on charge, and then maybe your skid steers or your dumpers or whatever, they go about their business while your excavators are getting juice on board, and then they all swap. I honestly don't know. But is anybody thinking of all of this? And I've mentioned this one before, but I'm going to mention it again. We have within the industry lots and lots of very, very, very skilled engineers. They might not have letters after their names and qualifications up the wazoo, but they can make a diesel. They can resurrect a diesel that hasn't run for 20 years old with little more than a screwdriver and a sledgehammer. If you are now talking all electric, that is a new skill that we're going to have to learn. And again, excuse me, my phone's going off. The other one that occurred to me, and this is something we've talked about on the show before, or I've certainly talked about, is this business of My dad used to tinker with his car. On a Sunday, my dad and the dads that lived around me would all be out tinkering with their cars, checking spark plugs, topping up the oil, topping up the water, all of the things that used to happen. And then somewhere along the line, somewhere around about the sort of late 80s, early 90s, I think, car manufacturers managed to sneak by us and make their cars so complex that even, somebody fairly skilled couldn't actually do that any longer. If you wanted to maintain your car, you had to take it to a dealer who had the laptop and the diagnostic equipment and all of the things that went with it. Are we headed down the same way? Are we going to get to a point where we have operators amongst us? And I'm not talking about fitters here. I'm talking about operators. By and large, the operators are pretty good at changing filters and fixing this and fixing that and adjusting track tensions and all that kind of thing. What's going to happen if one day, if you lift the bonnet, and I'm saying the bonnet loosely, you lift the bonnet and all you're looking at is just a stack of batteries. There's nothing you can get in there with. What happens then? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Chris Ford says, an hour to charge. How many machines on site requiring charging? How many charging points? Staggered breaks. Don't think it's going to work. And I do wonder, I hope you like the new camera angle, by the way. I do wonder if anybody is giving this any thought. And I also wonder if this is one of the reasons that we've not seen a huge take-up in electric machines yet. Let's say good morning to Jim Turner. Morning, Jim. Good of you to join us. Thank you very much indeed for being here. We are talking about a possible future. Do I look fat? No, I don't look too bad. Good. I'm going to move a bit closer, though, so you don't have to look at the belly quite so much. There you go. I think this T-shirt could have done with an iron. I do wonder, how is it going to be done? I've already mentioned the fact that we've got a bit of resistance, I think, to electric machines. And I wonder if that resistance is down to things like charging times, battery life, and all that kind of thing, and resale values, or whether it is actually down to we haven't yet figured out how all of this is going to work. Thomas Whiting, good one. Thomas says, once they get let me try that again with my brain in. Once they get 8.5 hours of runtime, it will become the norm to track back to the cabin and leave them on charge over the night. You'll plug everything in and the computer will schedule the charging through the night. Yes. Totally agree with that. And I'm sure it's only a matter of time. If you think about how long your old, I'm not talking Nokia here because Nokia were the exception. But if you think back to how long your mobile phone battery used to last as opposed to how it lasts now, and bearing in mind I shoot and play video on this and listen to podcasts, I use it for text, I occasionally even use it as a telephone, and I'll get more than a day out of that never used to be the case. So yes, I do agree battery technology will improve, battery duration will improve as we go along, but we're not there yet. Does that mean, I'm throwing this out there, does that mean that we hold off until we can actually get 8.5 hours of runtime, in which case we've got a lot of manufacturers who are, to use an expression that my father used to love, are they pissing in the wind? We're not going to take up electric machines in any great volume until we've got that runtime up to 8.5, 9 hours a day. Or are we going to just have to learn a new way of doing things? And I do wonder, we've seen, and I know we got a good response to it when we featured the Emma app from Volvo, where you can actually monitor your battery, how much juice you've got left, and all those kind of things. I can see that quite possibly with a younger generation of operators who are into their tech, and that is their constant companion. Or is that not the case? Is that not the case? Let's have a look. Construction Channel Luxembourg, that is Al Grierson. How is it done in Norway? It's a very good question. My answer to that, I don't know the answer, but my answer is probably one of my frustrations with the Brits is where some nations see an opportunity or see in advance and think we'll have a piece of that. I think the Brits generally are resistant to change, and sometimes they actually go in search of obstacles. Here's an electric machine. Yes, but what about the battery life? But what about the resale value? But what about the maintenance? Whereas you've got countries like Norway, I think the Netherlands are a little bit further down the line. The Swedes are certainly further down the line, who have just gone electric. That's cleaner. Let's give it a bash. And I'm going to ask the question. Obviously, somewhere between 80 and 85% of all plant that is sold in the UK goes through rental companies. Are they the ones that are holding us back from an electric future? And if they're holding us back from an electric future, come the glorious day when hydrogen pitches up all ready to go, will they be resistant to that as well? I'd like to know. Gary Muirhead says, how many plant fitters in the UK are being sent on training courses now by the companies? So we're up to speed with when the electric revolution starts. I have not heard of a single electric equipment course. And bearing in mind, and I'm going to go into my usual rant right now about training companies, training organizations. Training organizations will rub their hands together at any opportunity. We've seen the rise and rise of tilt rotators. There's a course for it. We've seen the rise and rise of GPS. There's a course for it. We've seen the rise and rise of certain attachments. There's a course for it. Where is the course for electric? And why are they holding back? You'd have thought they'd be rubbing their hands together. Chris Ford says a lot of younger plant operators haven't got a clue how to change a fuel filter nor grease the machine. They pick up the phone and shout help. But again, when you think about that, look like I'm completely bald there, doesn't it? There is hair there, I promise. Not much, I grant you. One of the things, obviously, we're going to see a change here. Obviously, how to change a fuel filter. You switch to electric. You're not filtering your fuel because it's an intangible. It's electric, and there'll be less moving parts. Obviously, the machine itself will still need greasing and so on down the line, but there's going to be a change. Frank Garvin says, bigger firms would definitely be more likely to sign up for a fixed price maintenance and repair contracts with a dealer, probably to cover 2,000 to 3,000 hours and added extended coverage thereafter if worthwhile. I think you're absolutely right. Thomas Whiting, there's the solution. Stick a Jenny on top of the digger, if only it were that easy. Ken Hatcher's just joined this morning, Ken. I hope you're fitting well down in Welsh Wales, my friend. Little phone and big fingers, a lot of misspelling and missed letters. Sorry, not a problem at all. Bearing in mind I write for a living, I do it all the time. Not a problem, sir. And will all these plant fitters have to be trained on different manufacturers' electric machines, or excuse me, or are they all going to be the same to work on? There's another point. Are we going to end up with the VHS and Betamax, bearing in mind, excuse me, I rock an iPhone. I've got an iPad. I'm talking to you on a Mac computer. I've got a Mac laptop somewhere here. All of that is one set of infrastructure, but there are people out there running Android phones. They have a different charger cable generally. Are we going to have that? Are we going to have people arriving for work and saying, okay, I need to charge this machine up? What machine have you got? I've got a Takuchi. No, I've got the wrong lead for that. I've got one for a Kubota, but I haven't got one for your Are we going to have that? Or are we going to end up with one of these where you have various heads to go on these chargers? It's an interesting point. Might be more long-term leasing and renting of that type of gear too, instead of buying. It's really interesting you should say that, Garvin, because one of the things that I found it quite hard to make this understood, because obviously I'm speaking in English and the guy I was speaking to was German. He spoke very good English, but I was really struggling to get this point across, is the fact that the impending switch to hydrogen, and more specifically to electric, does appear to have opened the way for people to take greater consideration of other opportunities. Like, we've had telematics for decades. They've been around for ages. We all know that they're there, and we all know how it works and everything else. And yet, with the possible switch to electric, we've had things like the Emma app from Volvo, and all of a sudden, it seems to be, if you run a diesel machine, telematics and machine tracking and all that kind of thing is a luxury. If you switch to electric, it's almost part and parcel of the switch. So if that is the case, will we see more long-term leasing and renting of that type of gear? Is there, and I've mentioned this, I mentioned this to JCB, and I'll tell you now, I mean, they didn't name names, so I can't name names. But I basically said, if you've got that level of telematics, so whereby if you've got an electric machine, you actually have to plug it in, so that, I mean, obviously you're tracking telematics all the time anyway, but if you're plugging it in, you're checking on charging times and all that kind of thing, surely there could come a time when a plant hire or a rental company could say, rather than charging you X pounds per week, we will charge you by actual runtime. We can track it. We know what it is. And yes, they will probably charge more per hour, but if you're not actually, if that machine is parked up, if it's switched off, you're not paying for it. So it averages itself out. I mentioned that to JCB and said, wouldn't that be a fantastic idea? And they said that one of the major rental companies has already discussed that. I don't know who it is, and I don't know how far that conversation got, but that really could change the landscape even further. Rather than hiring a machine for a week and accepting the fact that you're going to be paying for it to be parked for 40% of the time, you will only pay for the 60% in which you're using it. Yes, you may pay a premium for that 60%, but you will only be. And what does that mean to the lifetime of the machine? If a plant hirer is currently running machines for, let's say, 3 years, could they go to 4? Could they go to 4 because they know full well that actually, rather than running it for 3 years, the thing has been in existence for 3 years, but it's actually only run for 2 and a bit. Does that change things? Love to hear from you. Do we have the electric network for this? I personally think the electric has its applications. Urban mining, however, we are always historically and multiple fuel types. This will be one. Yeah, it's a good point. And, we're not unique in this, but I have to say, the UK government's approach to the power generation. Let's do as the Europeans tell us to do and close all our coal-fired power station, 20 plus of them. And yes, we do need to build some nuclear power stations that will come online in about 25 years' time. There's a lack of joined up thinking. We did, I know Ken Hatchery is very keen on this. We did get very close to the lights going out last year because we didn't have the capacity. There are ways and means, obviously. If you've got, I've mentioned this numerous times, you look at the company eVision, an offshoot of HE Services down in Kent, who run the Tesla hire company. They've got a huge warehouse full of Tesla cars, solar panels on the roof, and they are charging their cars for free. Are we going to see that in the rental business? Are we going to see that? You think about a site like Hinkley Point, not so much HS2, because HS2 is kind of a rolling program and it's getting further and further away. You'll need some long cables. But if you think about somewhere like Hinkley Point, where you are going to be on the same site for 5, 10, 15 years or whatever it might be, maybe solar panels. I also reported on a system from not the last ConExpo, but the one before, what is effectively a portable carport. So it's got a roof, a back, and a base. And the base is basically an induction charger. So you at the right point of time, you drive your machine onto that plate, and up comes the charger, charges your machine, and then you're away to go. But we will need to address that. And again, we've seen electric machines with kind of an umbilical cord, cable hanging out the back. Obviously, there are health and safety concerns about that. I realise it works in mines and quarries and that kind of thing. And it also works, I think, if you've got one machine. But if you've got 10, 15, 20 electric machines all trailing cables, A, you're going to end up with spaghetti on the site, and B, someone is going to get blown up. What do we do about that? Ken Hatcher says, the problem is in the UK, if you try to charge a big machine, they use huge amounts of kilowatts of power. The mains of the street would melt. Maybe you have to get a 500 kVA diesel generator on the job to charge it, which entirely defeats the object. What is the point of having a diesel generator to charge a supposedly clean, sustainable electric machine? It makes no sense whatsoever. There was quite a bit of news coverage a while back where there was a kind of a pop festival or something like that. I think it was held in Hyde Park in London, and they were talking about sustainability and the need for renewable power. And lo and behold, if you look behind the stage, there were these huge cat generators all running on diesel. Makes no sense. Makes no sense at all. Small machines, it probably works. It's Ken Hatcher. Big machines can't see it for a long time. But again, and I'll throw back to my discussions with Volvo. I have been of the belief, and trust me, I am not an expert. I have been of the belief that electric would probably top out around about 8 to 10 tons, and then above that would probably be hydrogen at some point in the future. We've already got two 20-ton machines from Volvo, the EC230 excavator and the L120H wheel loader at 20 tons. And according to my mate Frank Schmidt, they're planning to go bigger still. What is the limit? I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that. Chris is spot on about a lot of ops nowadays. A lot can't do anything but sit and drive a machine. So does that actually, interestingly, does that play to the situation that we have now? If we end up with operators who are very good, like the PlayStation generation, who are very good at wiggling levers, but they're not particularly good at blowing out filters and all that kind of thing, does that then play to the strengths and the benefit of equipment dealers who can basically seal the power unit because the operators are too daft to be able to deal with it? And now all of a sudden, if your machine goes down, well, it's going to be a £500 call out, and then it'll be another £100 for the diagnostic, and then we'll fix it. Are we headed down that way? Regenerative fuel source is the future. Be nice to think so. And again, I mean, we do have the ability to draw power from things like slew brakes and that kind of thing, but not enough to keep the machine running for the entire day. What happens next? Volvo was selling a shipping container that looked like it was full of batteries. It would pull power from the grid at a sensible rate, then dump it to the machine over lunch. Yeah, and interestingly, just on that point, if you go over to YouTube, you'll find the video. One of my questions to the Volvo team was, what happens to these battery packs in machines? So, like in the L120H or the EC230 or the smaller machines, what happens when those machines, when the batteries in those machines have deteriorated to the point that they can't actually hold a charge to that degree anymore? And they explained this idea of state of health, SOH. That is their watchword, or watchwords, should I say, for the state of an electric machine. And there will be deterioration. I mean, my iPhone is now about 18 months, maybe 2 years old. And at best, I can get 93% power in that. Volvo say that their SOH point is 80%. At the point that it gets to 80%, it's time to take those batteries out and replace them. There's 2 points here. First and foremost, going back to the shipping container, is those batteries can actually be taken out and inserted into one of those shipping containers, because you're not running them all the time, and that they will hold sufficient charge to be able to charge a machine. So there is a second life for the batteries. The other point as well was, I think we've been talking quite a lot about resale values and about the possible life expectancy of an electric machine. According to Volvo, and again, this is just Volvo, although our new electric equipment website will be digging deeper into this in the fullness of time. According to Volvo, they reckon that electric machines will have a better resale value than a diesel, because there are less moving parts, less to go wrong, and so on down the line. But also, if you take let's say their EC230, you take out the battery pack and you put another one in, you've effectively got a new machine. Yes, there will be some wear and tear on boom and dipper and so on down, and the undercarriage and what have you, but effectively, from the power source outwards, you've effectively got a new machine. Does it change things? Mostly diggers. Will there be an Apple digger with Lightning or USB-C? Bearing in mind, and I know what you're saying about different charger types and everything else, but bearing in mind the value of construction equipment, would it really be beyond imagination for somebody like Elon Musk to look at the construction equipment market and go, well, we've already got the Tesla battery technology. There are billions, and I do mean literally billions and billions of dollars worth of construction equipment and mining equipment and quarrying equipment being sold around the world. I can have a piece of that. Now, maybe Tesla doesn't become the new Caterpillar, but what about somebody like Caterpillar getting into bed with Tesla? They're both American. Why the hell not? Could we see that? Love to get your thoughts. No more fitting a second hour clock that runs all the time. Ken Hatcher says exactly how Rolls-Royce does it with the aircraft engine. That is exactly right. I think that's a really interesting point. There was a time back in the not too distant past where somebody would build an aircraft, they would hang a couple of Rolls-Royce engines off it, and they would run those until those engines didn't work anymore. Now, those engines are effectively rented on long-term lease to airline companies. And, as long as the plane itself has been looked after, when those engines reach the end of their natural life, they're hooked off and they're replaced. Exactly the same situation. Well spotted, Ken. Thank you for that. Has anyone actually made a comparison on diesel or electric machines, i.e. purchase cost, running cost, resale value, etc.? I am led to believe that, and this is an approximation, but I'm led to believe that the purchase cost of an electric machine is something like 1.5 to 1.8 the cost of a diesel machine, which in layman's terms is 1.5 times or nearly 2 times the cost. Two things though. The first thing is that will diminish, that differential will diminish over the coming years, because obviously battery technology will improve, and the more demand we have, the more batteries will come available, and so it will shrink. The gap will shrink. The other point as well is, according to Volvo, I keep referring to Volvo, but this is all fresh in my mind. According to Volvo, the differential in owning costs and owning and operating costs is like 30%. So if you are paying maybe 1.5 times as much for your machine, but your machine is costing you a third less to run, and it's a higher resale value potentially. And I think more than ever, I know we've seen this in mining and quarrying. I know Caterpillar were very early to the party on this notion of, rather than buying a machine, you operated it on a cost per ton. So you had a contract with your Caterpillar dealer, and they would basically rent you or lease you the machine based on cost per ton. So all of those factors, including repair, maintenance, all those sort of things, were factored in, and how much material could you move per ton. So could we go for the same model further down the line? And again, going back to our ability with telematics and GPS to track these machines to the nth degree, the technology is there to make that happen. Peter McKenna has just arrived. Sorry I'm late. How is everyone? Well, I think so far everyone's been absolutely fine. Good morning to you, Peter. Chris Ford is laughing. I'm not sure what he's laughing at. You need a football field of solar panels to charge one 20-ton excavator. They use huge kilowatts of power. People don't realise. It's an interesting one. Thing is, there are a lot of options on site now, solar, etc. Again, I was talking fairly small changes, like changes to your lunch breaks and stuff like that. But if if construction companies, particularly major projects like power stations, like major road projects, like major rail projects, and so on down the line, particularly those that are government funded, and the government is supposedly driving the green agenda. If that is the case, if we do genuinely require a football field of solar panels, so be it. So be it. And again, we're talking here about sustainability and renewable. What about if we have a football field of solar panels so that we can charge the machines? And then when that project is done and dusted, those are all collected and moved somewhere else to charge something else. I've seen a 30-tonner battery Doosan rather. So yeah, we're at 20, 25, 30 tons at the moment. Now, whether we will go further, Volvo claim we will, but whether we will go further, but then hydrogen will push that back down again, I don't know. But there was another interesting point. I know we're talking about hydrogen as a savior fuel for the industry. Hydrogen combustion, which is what obviously JCB are using, you're effectively taking what is ostensibly a diesel engine and running it on hydrogen. If, however, you're talking about a hydrogen fuel cell, what you're actually doing is using hydrogen to create electricity to run the machine. And again, according to Volvo, you are expending huge amounts of electrical energy to create hydrogen from water, to create hydrogen, and you're then putting that hydrogen into a fuel cell to turn it back into electricity. That makes no sense. It makes no sense from a logistical or a sustainability point of view. Why use all that electrical power to create something to then turn it into electrical power? Just create electrical power and learn how to store it. Peter McKenna says, Morgan Sindel are using electric mini excavators on the site I'm on. They're averaging 6 hours work out of a full charge. Again, it goes back to this intermediate charge. If there is an intermediate charge there, 12:30 in the afternoon, while your man's having his lunch break, you're through to the end of the day. No problem at all. So it is possible. Garvin says it was a modified Doosan, also a modified battery Doosan Duck. Looked like a 17 Duck, all in Oslo in Norway. And I do wonder, actually, that's a good thought, because I've not been to Norway for quite some time. I do wonder if that is worth a visit, because it does appear, I mean, when you think about Volvo as an example, Volvo are a Swedish company, but the people that are really seizing upon this electric power do seem to be the Norwegians. Maybe I need a trip to Oslo. If anybody's listening, I'd like to go to Oslo, please. A cool thing about the Volvo shipping container was they used old machine batteries, giving them a second life. Precisely that. Yeah, precisely that. And again, I do have, can I find it? I probably can. Bear with me 1 second. If you haven't seen it already, I do actually have a new website that is now dedicated to all things electric equipment. There's an interview in there with a guy called Frank Schmidt. I mean, I could play that for you if you like. But one of the points that he makes, I actually asked him about the notion of when we get to the end of the working life of a battery, what happens to it? Because I think there's a lot of scare stories going around about, oh, they'll end up in a landfill and we're wasting all this lithium. And he looked at me like I was some kind of lunatic. He said, no, you just take those batteries out and you use them for something else. And the two examples he gave was the one that Al Grierson's referred to there, put them into a shipping container, one of these battery packs, and you use them for storing electrical power, or you put them in your own house, your house that now has solar panels, because presumably that could be where we end up, and you use those partially spent batteries to actually store the energy that you've gathered from the sun. It's a good point. Alfred Graham, Footy Williams. So is it going to get rid of fuel? What happens to planes, boats that use a lot of diesel? We've already seen electric planes that they exist, and BMW, very interestingly, although I thought BMW were already pretty well down the line of electric cars. They have actually built an electric super yacht on the basis, by and large, that if we can make a super yacht that is entirely all electric and sail that around the world, then creating a car to pop to your local supermarket, not going to be a problem. That's kind of the marketing spiel. As a slight aside, if anybody likes their movie soundtracks, you will know that a lot of certainly the Christopher Nolan movies are soundtracked by a guy called Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer has actually created a playlist for the BMW super yacht. There is one copy in existence of that playlist, and it exists only. It's got nothing to do with electrical power, but it exists only on that super yacht. So there is an exclusive Hans Zimmer playlist on the BMW super yacht. I heard that on the radio the other day. Thought it was interesting, particularly as Hans Zimmer started as a sound engineer on the old Ultravox albums. And as you all know, I'm a huge Ultravox fan. Definition of an expert is someone who's been and spent. What? It's a drip under pressure. I may need to revisit that. I personally think we are still years and years away from seeing an all-electric future. We're definitely getting there, but not there just yet. And diesel is here for a long time to come. I totally agree. And I do think, I think we tend to look at these things in a very kind of finite way. Like Volvo have said that they are going to be emission-free by 2040. But that is then complicated by the fact that some of their machines will last for 10 years or more. So their plan is basically to be effectively emission-free by 2030, which is just 7 years away. But when 2030 arrives, it will not be a case of all of the diesel machines go away, all of the diesel stops flowing through the tanks, and electric suddenly kicks in. It will not be that. There will... to be perfectly honest, I think we will still have diesel equipment of some description in certain applications way beyond my retirement time and way into the future. But there is going to be a crossover, and electric and hydrogen will begin to kick in. I'll make another point about electric machines, and I'm planning to speak to an American company who have really recognised this. I think we're currently... And again, I think this goes back to the British tendency to put obstacles in our way. We're currently looking at electric purely as a potential replacement for diesel. What about the other opportunities that electric opens up? And I'm thinking specifically now about the bit that I write about the most, which is demolition. One of the most labor-intensive bits of the demolition process is not the actual taking down of the building; it's stripping the thing out, the soft strip, as they call it. So you're taking out plasterboard and bits of timber and glass and cabling and all that kind of thing. By and large, that is currently done by hand. So not only is it labor intensive, you have gangs of 20, 30, 40 guys in there. Obviously, they are then exposed to potential injury and accident and that kind of thing. One of the reasons for that is while we can mechanize and put equipment on the actual demolition of the building, high reaches, demolition robots, and all points in between, because of the noise, the vibration, and more specifically the emissions from diesel machines, we can't actually mechanize a lot of that soft strip process. But now we can, and there is an American company who, as I say, I'm due to speak to next week, actually. There is an American company who have spotted that and said, we could have a piece of that. And I know from my own personal experience, speaking to demolition companies, the soft strip gangs, not only are they among the most injured, they're also among the most unreliable. You hire a gang of 20 and sometimes you'll get 12, sometimes you'll get 4, sometimes you'll get 15. Rather than sending in 20 guys, you send in 3 machines that are silent, produce no emissions, no sparking or anything like that, and they can get that job done. All of a sudden, your woes about people turning up on time or turning up at all have gone away. Is that a possibility for the future? Peter McKenna says, I wouldn't get on a battery power plane. I would. I would. If we could harness the energy put into all the shite talk I hear on site. Hey, listen. If we could power a machine by me talking nonsense, our problems would go away. But yes, if you could harness the energy put into all the shite talk I hear on site, we'd have unlimited energy to run these machines, enough to charge our electric vans to and from site. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Those same rubber shops don't know how to let a track down when they get off. Get a track off. They are the "it's not my job" people, which is what really gets my goat. The sooner they toss it off for a half shift and wait for a fit to turn up, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Panasonic are massive battery manufacturers. Uh, there is a link here from Peter. I'm not too sure. Check these out. I can't check it out because I can't work that link from where I am, but I'll take a look after the show. History is a great teacher. 100 years ago, man could hardly build a plane. Within 50 years, he would put a man on the moon. Electric vehicles have been around longer, but the need to progress them had waned. Be interesting what the next 50 years bring. Think about it. You think about, when I was a kid, one of the sounds of my youth was that hum of the old milk floats, which were basically made of batteries, if you remember rightly. We had a near where I lived. I used to do a paper round, and there's a road, quite a steep slope. We had a lot of snow and ice over the evening once, and a milk float. It was doing no speed. The guy had basically stopped, and the milk float had basically just slid down the hill. But the thing weighed a ton, and it had written off 4 or 5 cars made of batteries. This is not new at all. Caterpillar made an electric excavator 15 years ago. Black Beauty. Apparently, the cost was 10 times the amount, but it has dropped. 15 years ago, 15 times. We're now down to 1.5 times. That's one hell of a reduction, and that reduction will continue. Mark Whiting says, I've been told that on average, a battery machine is twice the cost at the moment. Again, the freshest information I have is from Volvo. They said a price premium of 1.5 to 1.8%, 1.8 times. So, yes, twice the cost, roughly, more or less. Or do they bring an engine out that runs on water? Apparently that exists. Will the oil companies allow that to happen? I wonder. Mining diggers are electric, and they are 1,000 ton plus. No battery, though they need a big cable. Yeah, and when you look at big cables, but you've also got the big mining trucks from the likes of Liebherr running with the overhead power cables as well. There are ways and means on these things. Bavarian construction equipment manufacturer Sennerbogen has unveiled the 653E electro battery telescopic crawler crane at Bauma Trade Fair. 50-ton model is said to combine the benefits of battery technology, proven advantages of the telescopic crawler crane design. I'm supposed to be going to see Sennerbogen in a few weeks' time. I hope to see that. What about the remote sites like we have up here in Scotland? I've seen myself working out on peat bogs. Where would we leave the machine out in the field and travel to and from the machine, personal carrier, and take drums of diesel? I think it's the same as anything, isn't it? Liken it to Wi-Fi connectivity or broadband connectivity. I think those that will see the benefits of electric first will probably be in inner cities, urban environments. Obviously, we have our ULEZ, highly popular it is too, that our friend Sadiq Khan has put in place to reduce emissions in London. Obviously, if it goes in London, which it already has, you can expect to see that rolled out in Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds and so on down the line. So I think the first people that will likely get it will be the inner cities. Just speaking of the ULEZ thing, somebody pointed out to me very, very aptly the other day, we don't want you polluting the London air with your gas guzzling cars. But if you pay £12.50, knock yourselves out. That, I think, sums up Sadiq Khan's real commitment to the environment. But again, going back to the point I've just made, I think you will see, and even if you look at the ULEZ effectively started as more or less the City of London, and it's got bigger, and it's got bigger, and it's got bigger. I am actually now living in a ULEZ area. or as of about a week's time, I think it is. Thankfully, I mean, we run a semi-hybrid car. We're fine. It makes no odds to us whatsoever. But I am now in a ULEZ area. Speaking of which, it only occurred to me this morning, 7 years ago today, I was in hospital because I just had my demolition accident. 7 years ago today. ID Tech X's research shows that the average electric machine will fall short of running a continuous 8-hour day. Yeah. Which goes back to our intermediate charge. Yeah, that's, I think, where we will end up. Has our useless government come out with a timescale for all on-site plant and equipment to be electric? Not as such, no. Funnily enough, I mean, that's where we've got a bit of an open-ended question. If you've been charting, which I know a lot of you guys have, if you've been charting the fall off in emissions over the past decade and a bit, you will remember that we had things like Tier 3, Tier 3A, Tier 3B, Tier 4, Tier 5. As it stands in the... and all of those had a fixed date by which certain categories of plant and equipment needed to comply. We do not currently have a date for... I guess it will be called Tier 6. I don't actually know the answer to that, but there is not actually a date in mind for Tier 6. Does that mean that governments plural, not just the UK, but possibly Europe or possibly even worldwide, does that mean that they are kind of giving up on lowering diesel emissions on the basis that it's about to be replaced anyway? I don't know the answer to that. Thomas Whiting says spent batteries will be one of the richest sources of lithium. They will get recycled, remanufactured, much in the way that copper does. Yeah, I know somebody, and I can't remember who it was. It may have been Peter McKenna, it may have been Ken Hatcher, but somebody was saying we've already had one lithium recovery facility built in the UK. You can imagine that's going to be a very, very lucrative business to be in. Not right now, but I think if you build it today for 10 years hence, I think you will be rolling in money. Bloody YouTube is buffering again. Shite platform nowadays for live shows. Pop over to Facebook. Pop over to LinkedIn. I can't recommend that they're going to be any better, but I'm on both. Can't we? Or Twitter, by the way. Twitter. Demolition News on Twitter. Can't we have mini fusion reactions on the machine? They never need fuel ever. If you're concerned about the potential issues of dragging cables about the place, surely dragging nuclear reactors about construction places is going to be a bit of an issue. I'm sure the AdBlue producing industry will be wanting to delay the rollout of the electric revolution. Yeah. And again, if anybody has ever actually watched it, I didn't actually say as much, but I produced a... Did I do it as an audio or did I do it as a video? Can't remember, but I did a piece about the mysterious death of Rudolf Diesel, the bloke what invented the diesel engine. And he perfected a diesel engine that could run on what at the time I think was peanut oil, so not dissimilar to HVO that we have today. But he did that 100 years ago. And then he upped and died, fell overboard on a boat. And 100 years later, we're still only now getting to grips with HVO. Now, the guy may have been suicidal, having now become world famous and probably earning a fortune from his patented diesel engine. Somebody may have just taken umbrage to his face and thrown him overboard. Or did the oil industry go, we can't have this bloke flogging peanut oil engines because that will ruin us? I wonder. Sorry, had to change. Facebook keeps buffering. I'm starting to wonder if it's at your end, Peter, actually. Morgan said we're using electric mini excavators on site. They only run for 6 hours per charge. Recharge time is 4 hours. That seems excessive. And again, going back to the point that Frank Schmidt was making over on the electric earth moving equipment website that we've just created, the point that he was making was you run from start of the day till lunchtime, by which time the battery is third full. You intermediate charge it for an hour and a bit, go back to work, and that will take you right the way through to the following day. it will take you through to the close of day, and then you can recharge overnight. Is what I mean. Let's have a look. Disability cars don't pay ULEZ charges. Do you have a disability car, Peter? Be interested to know. The problematic is the same kilowatts of fuel used in whatever form of energy. Really, diesel engines quite clean now with AdBlue. They are. But again, did we fix anything with engines that required AdBlue? Was that a step forward? We've made the engines cleaner, but in order to make them cleaner, you've now got to spend money and time adding this additional jollop to your engine to keep those engines clean. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The Royal Mint is starting to recover gold from old phones. Big business, I would imagine. Look at the guy that built a car that runs entirely on tap water. Indeed. I read the other day the National Grid needs to be 5 times the size size to charge all the electric cars. Going to be a massive problem. Get ready for your lights to go out. Again, I know Ken has got a real passion for this. We got very close last year. I'm trying to remember. I think we got one warning, but I know there were parts of the country that got several warnings that we were almost at capacity. And bearing in mind, anybody that does actually watch electricity usage, if there is something like maybe a big football game, like if England, the men, made it to a World Cup final or whatever it might be, at half time, all the kettles in the country go on. That would be enough to take us down. Excuse me. I've got a cup of tea sat beside me. I'm now allowed to go cold, and I can't drink cold tea. So yes, we are already not right now because we're in summer and we're not really an air conditioning country. But when winter rolls around and we need the electricity for heat and light and everything else, we will be back at the very limits. Where we're going to get that additional power from, bearing in mind, since last year, we'll have lost at least one, possibly two other sources of energy with another couple of power stations closing, and we're still a long way away from getting our nuclear replacement. Our governments of this world are only worried about the environment above their heads. What about the rest of the world's population? So I did watch a video of China producing thousands of electric cars and parking them in fields so they can tell the world they're the biggest producer of electric cars. Nothing about the vast amount of coal they're burning. Yeah, but the one thing I would say about this is I don't personally, I think given the what did the guy say? We're now at boiling point. I don't think we can take that attitude any longer. It's like saying, well, I'm not going to recycle because my next door neighbour doesn't. That's not an excuse. You know, I think we all have to do what we can do. More likely it was geopolitical. Wasn't he thinking about selling diesel submarine engines to the UK? Who was that? Don't know. Yes, I have a disability car. Another year to go. Apparently this year we've lost 2 coal power stations that they use as backup. So fingers crossed. Yeah, and again, that's another point. We used to have. I say we used to have. There is a notion in the power generation field called peak shaving. So you have a predicted demand. So we know that at a certain point in the evening, people will settle down to watch Coronation Street, for example, and the need for electricity will take a slight increase. Because we've charted it over millions of seconds and days and hours and everything else, we know what that is. But there is a backup system. And that backup system is used for peak shaving. So when the demand goes into a real peak, those other forms of energy kick in to take the peak off. We've lost that. And we haven't replaced it. At the moment, there is only 20% of the UK's need for public electric chargers. Most of the existing ones are either out of action or cost as much as running a diesel car. Is that better? I think it probably is. Yes, if you think back to COVID times or pre-COVID times, we were there was a real advantage to having an electric car, even though running something like a Tesla has its inconveniences and everything else. There was an advantage to having that, but with the rise and rise and rise of electric costs, they're pretty much on a par now, and I think that's been unfortunate. I think we could have seen a greater take up of electric cars and electric machines had we actually had that differential still. Hopefully you're hearing me while I'm saying this, because the sound is weird on this end. I've got a mic that I can turn the sound on and off. Sometimes my computer listens, sometimes it doesn't. Let's have a look. Ken Hatcher says, think about to get a 12 kilovolt electric diesel generator. Thank you, out there. All good now. Thank you very much indeed. If you fix the electric charging point at your house, you know you need a free phase electric supply, which they need to dig up the road to put into your house for you. It's a really good point. I mean, I know a couple of people that run Teslas, and it has, for both good and bad, it has changed their life. One of the guys that I know that runs a Tesla has basically rewired his house to accommodate a charger. He switched his energy supplier to take advantage of overnight charging, and as a result, he's installed timers on various appliances like his washing machine and his tumble dryer, so the clothes washing and the tumble drying takes place in the middle of the night when the energy is at its cheapest. All of which I understand, and admirable and everything else. But he travels for business, and as a result of that travel for business, he actually chooses his route by where are the superchargers along the way. He chooses the hotels that he stays in while he's away, according to whether they've got an electric power supply or not. And I would guess, and going back to Gary Muirhead's point earlier, there will be parts of the country where, is it actually practical to take an electric car? Could you go to the Orkney Isles and safely know that you can charge your car? Apologies to the Orkneys. I'm not suggesting you're stuck in the dim and distant past, but I'd be interested to know. Still broadcasting? I think I am. If somebody can let me know. I've not pressed the stop button. Hopefully you can still hear me. I sometimes wonder if it's all about the dollar, this global warming lark. We know there was an ice age. We know there was an event that wiped out all the dinosaurs, apart from a few of us, and the Peak District was underwater, and man had sweet FA to do with that. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The one thing I would say is, when there is a buck in it, it will drive innovation. Don't get me wrong, I as much as I do genuinely admire the likes of Volvo and JCB and these companies that are pursuing sustainable energy and everything else. But I will never lose sight of the fact that they are also making a fine old living doing it. And if you could sell a machine at 1.8 times the cost of its diesel equivalent, and if in so doing you have done away with the ability for the customer to fix that machine, and therefore they have to go to a dealer and buy only dealer parts and dealer service, not a bad business to be in. Never lose sight of that. Al Grissom says, the small non-posh hotel I stayed in, I can't imagine you staying anywhere non-posh, Al, but the non-posh hotel I stayed in during Stein Expo had a parking lot with 6 parking spots for electric cars in the world's most medieval small town. It's an interesting point, isn't it? And again, going back to those little changes I was talking about an hour and 4 minutes ago, right back at the very beginning of this show. I was talking about, longer lunch breaks and that kind of thing. Imagine those medieval towns. Do we now have charging points where I don't know, former shops used to exist? I mean, you couldn't park on my local high street to charge a car. But bearing in mind the way that high streets are changing, I mean, my local high street used to be a bit of a destination shopping centre. People would travel from 10, 15 miles away to actually come and use the shops. Basically, we are now a collection of charity shops and coffee shops. That's all that there is. There's no reason to go there whatsoever. Now, I know I've had the conversation with Neil Edwards, and I'm meeting Neil on Friday next week, just to let you know. Completely social, nothing to do with business whatsoever. But we talked about the way that we need to look at planning when it comes to our high streets. We've now got all these empty shops and empty premises above shops and that kind of thing. Could we not just change the planning regulations and allow people to live there? Possibly not live on the high street frontage, but possibly live above. So we've got that. But if we are now accepting the fact that, with the rise of online shopping, the high street has largely had its day. Could we not see a change in the landscape whereby they become charging points? I don't know. I'm asking the question. Is it right Tesla installed 48 chargers somewhere and no electricity to feed them? National Grid said we get electric cables to them in 5 years' time if we can. I hadn't heard that. One thing I did see was, and I think it was last year, there was I think it was in Germany, there was a big sort of motorway service station that had 30, 40, 50 charging points, but they had a queue of about 150 Teslas all waiting to be charged up. Is that something we've got to look forward to? And again, think about the logistics of that. If you stop for petrol or diesel in your car, you pull into a petrol station. Let's talk about doing it on a motorway, for example. You're hurtling down the M40 or up the M1 or whatever it might be. You call in to top up with diesel or petrol. What does it take? A minute to fill your car up? By the time you've sometimes popped in, paid for it, grabbed yourself a Mars bar and a can of Coke, you've got back in your car, you're a minute and a half, 2 minutes, even if you've had to queue, 3 minutes, you're back on the road. If you drive a Tesla and you need to charge that, even a supercharger, you're going to be sat there for an hour. What does that do to your working day? I'm also a big fan of hydrogen. I understand it takes a lot of energy to produce it, but when we have all this energy being produced during the day, when demand is low, we could use it and have these massive hydrogen plants built next to these massive wind farms. It's a win-win situation. It is a win-win situation. I totally share your optimism about hydrogen, but it's a ways off. It's a ways off. And again, going back to, I mentioned this in the article that I've written over on our electric machine website. We've all seen those first-gen hydrogen machines from Hyundai and from Liebherr, and they all look a bit Quasimodo. They've all got a hump on their back because you need quite a lot of room to fit hydrogen fuel cells for a 20-ton plus machine. There's a lot got to give. And as it stands at the moment, I mean, JCB, was it Grant Shapps was up at JCB a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, and he said, smug git that he is, I've challenged JCB to have hydrogen machines available for sale by next year. I don't know who he is to challenge JCB to do such things. And if I were Lord Bamford, I'd have sent him on the way and told him not to let the door hit him on the arse on the way out. However, he has challenged JCB to do that. Assuming they do, assuming JCB actually say, yep, we've proven in the field that our hydrogen combustion engine is up to the job. We are now ready to roll. Where would you go to fuel it? Has anyone actually seen somewhere that sells hydrogen fuel, sells hydrogen? Is there somewhere where you can go and plug in your JCB backhoe with its hydrogen combustion engine and juice her up? I haven't seen one. Admittedly, I don't leave this cubby hole much, but I haven't seen one. Do they exist? Chris Ford, sell a machine at 1.8 times the cost of the others. I know some manufacturers that do that already. Yeah. They do. Obviously, you're paying a fair old premium if you want the Cats and the Liebherrs of this world. And again, does that open the way? And I said this very early doors. One of the first electric machines that I saw that really seemed to be taking the bull by the horns was XCMG showed a prototype 5-ton mini excavator at the Conexpo before last, and it just looked like, yes, this is how it's supposed to be. It just looked complete. We've been for as long as I've been writing about plant, there has been a league table of global manufacturers, and Caterpillar and Komatsu have taken up the 1 and 2 positions for that entire time. 35 odd years. It's been Caterpillar first, Komatsu second, and then a fight for third and fourth place. XCMG is now in third place. Could they overtake Komatsu, bearing in mind their real drive for electric machines? And I'm talking electric machines from that 5-tonner, which is now no longer a prototype, but a living, breathing piece of equipment. But they are also running electric mining trucks and all points in between. They have taken the bull by the horns. And when you think about Caterpillar, I know Ken Hatcher mentioned the fact that Caterpillar has got or had a 15-ton or a whatever it was, an excavator running on electric 15 years ago. But where you've got Volvo pursuing electric, you've got JCB pursuing electric, Liebherr pursuing electric, Hitachi pursuing electric. The only real move I've seen Caterpillar make in the field of electric, and I know they have electric trucks at the mining end, but in general plant, the only thing I've seen them do so far was that D6 XE, which isn't even electric powered, it's electric drive. There's a diesel engine driving electric motors that then turn the tracks. What are Caterpillar doing? Now, the chances are, knowing Caterpillar, they will come to the market fully kitted out and just say, as of tomorrow, we're all electric. What happens? What happens? Could XCMG actually usurp Komatsu? Could they even overtake Caterpillar? And could all of that stem from electric? I wonder. Ken Hatcher says it's the way forward. I don't think it's just the UK having problems supplying all the electricity. It isn't. Again, because I've just returned from Hamburg, we were talking about it. I mean, they've closed them again now, although I don't think they've been fully mothballed. There was a period late last year where Germany basically reopened a couple of coal-fired power stations and even a coal mine to supply them because they were that close to the limit themselves. So, yeah, still a ways to go. According to Google, there are 15 places in the UK to fill up with hydrogen. I wonder where they are. Ken Hatcher says China will take over the world, and we'd have nobody to blame but ourselves. You know, we've seen it all before. You know, we've seen when the rise and rise of the Germans, we've seen the rise and rise of the Japanese and the Taiwanese and the Koreans and everything else, and we kind of stand idly by. And when you think, is it Hinkley Point that is part funded by the Chinese government? We're basically signing over part of our own power generation to a foreign state. Why are we doing that? Do we need to do that? Has XCMG jumped on the bandwagon, hydrogen or electric? I've heard nothing about hydrogen from XCMG, but they have a lot, and I do mean a lot, of electric equipment. I've never done the maths, but I would hazard a guess that they have probably got the broadest range of electric powered machines in the world right now, because they go from micro to mini to compact excavators and skid steers and all of that, but they've also got the mining end as well. My guess is they probably have. Ken Hatcher has just put a YouTube link up. I'd need to come offline to do that, and I'm going to be doing that very shortly, because I have been talking for an hour and a quarter, which is more than enough of anyone's time on a Saturday morning. What have we got coming up? Yeah. I haven't had my box through from Lou as yet. I'm sure it's on its way. As soon as we get that and we know exactly what it is in there, I will host another Wednesday evening show. Obviously, we've got a full suite of shows to do next week for the Breakfast Show. I thought I'd just unplug myself, actually. So, yeah, Monday through to Friday. On Friday next week, I'm actually having lunch with Neil Edwards. I've already said that. But it still allows me to do this show well, not this show, but the Breakfast Show as well. We've got lots and lots of stuff to share with you. So please stick around for that. If there's anything else, I'll keep you posted. One other point, and I do need to very quickly, I'm not entirely sure I've got the dates in my phone, but I'm going to check it very quickly. Let's have a look. Yeah, my wife, the long-suffering Mrs. A, goes to Greece on Wednesday, the 13th of September. So it's been a long time coming. My plan is that on Saturday, the 16th of September, we're going to try and break a record. We're going to go for our current record for these shows, for our for all our shows, our nighttime shows, our breakfast shows, and all the points in between. Our current record is 2 hours and 14 minutes. I want to beat it. I want to beat it by quite some margin. I'd like to double it, ideally. So I'm pulling together content, but I also think we could do a lot of this. And the more I think about it, the more I actually wonder if, rather than trying to present lots and lots of video and stuff like that, we could actually just come up with, let's say, 10 topics. And I may leave you to do that. Are we still on for Monday's show? I'll be here. Yes. Yes. So I think the point I'm trying to make is, rather than just inundating you with lots and lots of video, some of which you may well have seen before, if we come up with the top 10 topics, and I'll pick some, you pick some, we'll just come up with that at the start, and we will just, much the same as we've done today, we've talked electric machines to death for 1 hour and 16 minutes. So we could do electric machines, we could do training and competence cards, we could do gender equality, we could do mental health, we could do whatever takes your fancy. And I reckon we could probably fill 4 hours. And 4 hours and 28 minutes would be an absolute, well, that would make my day, make my year, because that would be double our longest ever show. That being said, I am playing at it. There is a girl that my son watches from time to time over on Twitch who is doing what they refer to as a subathon. The way the subathon works is she's done a live stream, and every time while she's live streaming, people are subscribing to her channel. And every time she passes a subscription milestone, it increases the length of her live stream. She's currently been going for 9 days, and this includes her going to bed, sleeping, waking up the following morning, and carrying on. She's been going for 9 days, and she's got at least another 78 hours to go. And there is every possibility that that will just keep going and going and going. I am not going to do that, but I'd sit around and have a chat with you people for 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever it might be. And I completely forgot to do it today, but I can put the link up for you to actually join us on the show. So if you want to come on and have a chat yourself, and basically take the load off of me, you could be the host for the day, or for part of it. You can do that. The package on its way from Lucani at Parcel Force. Fantastic. Looking forward to seeing that. For a moment, I thought you were going to invite us around for a party while the boss is away. I could still do that. One of I listened to a thing the other day. I am going to finish this in a second. I was listening to a thing the other day, and is anybody aware of the Sidemen on YouTube? People like KSI and a bunch of others making millions from live streaming and YouTubing and all of the things. One of the things that they said has been a real benefit to their channel is actually doing physical events. So they took over part of the Southampton football stadium about 3 years ago to host a charity football match. They then took over the Charlton Athletic Stadium in its entirety, and more recently, they took over the London Stadium and they filled it. 80,000 people turned up to watch a charity football match because these guys, for a certain generation, are so famous. And the ability to actually go and meet and greet people, actually shake them by the hand, put their arm around them and have a chat and all that kind of thing is a real thing. So I have two things on my list of challenges that I want to do. The first is to do a marathon live stream. As I say, I'm aiming for 4 hours, assuming my throat will hold out that long. So that will be on Saturday, whatever I said the date was. What did I say the date was? Yeah, Saturday, the 16th of September. So mark that in your diary. But then the next thing is I actually want to get out on the road and do some live events. And that's being overly grand. What I'm not talking about, I'm not even talking about filming them. I'm talking about actually coming to various places in the UK because I do need to get out and about a little bit more than I have been recently, and actually say, okay, well, I'm going to be in, I don't know, Bolton on Wednesday the 15th of November or whatever it might be, and rather than going there, doing what I need to do and coming back, I'll stay. And we'll get a bunch of us, even if it's 3, 4, 5 people, get us all together. We'll have a pie and a pint. You can have the pint, I'll have the pie, and we'll just chew the fat. And I think we as you've seen, you people have given up part of your Saturday morning to come along and have a chat. We have a community here. It would be fantastic if that community was not just online but offline as well. Al Grisson says, over the weekend I'll start working on that Stein Expo video for the show. Fantastic. Have to clear space on my PC for all the raw video. Yeah, I bet that's enormous. But I've seen some bits and pieces from the likes of Komatsu and Hyundai direct from the show, and it did look fantastic. I always tell people that Stein Expo is German Hillhead. Well, we all know how good Hillhead is. I think most of us know how good Hillhead is. So German Hillhead. Imagine Hillhead with bratwurst and pretzels. That's not a bad place to be, is it? So yes, I'm looking forward to seeing that, Al. So go clear some space, and I look forward to hearing from you. Perhaps Red Bull could sponsor the marathon show. Let's face it, Red Bull sponsor everything else, don't they? I can't drink Red Bull, not anymore. Literally palpitations, and I have to admit it was a bit of a Red Bull and vodka bender. Count me in, desperate for a desperate Dan pie, complete with cow horns. Well, it was called cow pie, wasn't it? Desperate Dan, I think it probably was. So yes, that will be 16th. We're doing our marathon show. I will come up with a set of topics to cover, and we will have a free for all, because we always do. And then after that, I don't know if we'll get it in this year. I'd like to think we can do at least one this year. Actually get out and about and meet up with some of you guys and do some bits and pieces together. It would be fantastic. This camera, which I can show you now, that camera there, it does actually shoot pretty wide. So I think if we found the right venue and we actually set that up and put it at one end of the table, so we had half a dozen of us in shot, and we could do a show together. Be fantastic. Sounds a great idea, Mark. It must be a good few in Notts, Derbyshire area. Yeah, I'm sure there is. Funnily enough, and unfortunately, it is the furthest bloody point away. But our biggest viewership, our biggest listenership, is in Scotland. And I learned yesterday, and this is we're still figuring it out. I'm going to throw this up just in case Gary is actually leaving. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. Thank you very much indeed. Ken Hatter is off to wash his car. Job was cancelled today. Next week now. Okay, indeed. Go do your things. But the one thing that came up yesterday, I've been speaking to a publishing company that are kind of in an allied business, but we don't really cross over, but we're in the same sort of business. But we're talking about doing something together at Intermat in Paris next year. And I learned yesterday from our friend Steve Williamson that Intermat coincides with Scott Plant. I need to check exactly what the dates are and how the crossover is and where everybody needs to be. But there is a possibility that once again I may miss Scott Plant, so I may just have to bite the bullet and say, sod it, I'm going to Scotland. I'm going to Scotland for a couple of days, and I'm going to go around and meet some of our Scottish folks, because I've met a lot of them. But the one, our most loyal viewer by a long shot, is probably Gary Muirhead. We've speak daily, and we exchange bits and pieces here and there. Never met the guy, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I may have to take a translator so that he can understand what I'm saying, and I'm sure it may need to go both ways. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that. So I'll watch this space. We are going to do that at some point in the not too distant future. Everybody, that's an hour and 24 minutes. You see, an hour and 24 minutes talking about nothing whatsoever. In which case, talking for 4 hours shouldn't be a problem at all. Lou Carney has just confirmed that Intermat is actually the 24th to 27th of April. I'm not sure what the dates of Scott Plant are, if any. Scott Plant are. I've got as I say, Steve Williamson assures me that they do coincide. If that's the case, then maybe I need to fly from Paris to Edinburgh or Edinburgh to Paris, whatever it might be, just to make the ends meet. But one way or another, we'll figure it out. Right, people, go and have a fantastic weekend. Sorry to have interrupted your Saturday mornings. I'll see you again on Monday morning for more of the same. Till then, have a good one. All the best.